Somebody commented on one of our digital channels the other day. The guys forwarded this to me. They're like, I have no idea how Graham is on air. He can barely put two words together. Wow. I'm like, that is true.
That's harsh.
It is actually kind of true. I have a stutter sometimes. I'm like,
we edit it out as well as we can.
People can be judgmental ass, and I always go back to that one lovely quote that it's not the doer, it's not the critic that counts. It's not the it's not the man who points out how the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who's in the arena, and it's so true. Critics, it's like nothing.
When I first got on Facebook, it asks for a quote. This is in like 2005.
Yeah,
that was a quote I put on in 2005.
I love that
and
quote.
I never.
I have that literally written into one of my polar diaries, and it's you know, how the man whose face is marred by sweat and blood and dust, so he'll never be amongst the cold and tepid souls that neither know the something of great achievement or the depths of, you know, they just sit in the grey band.
Right.
Mm. If only we had that on camera.
Yeah, we do have that.
We're rolling on everything. We're just gonna wait for that to turn off before we like get started. But this will be used.
So which camera do I look at? All of them?
Yeah, just dart your eyes back and forth.
In a really awkward way.
Yeah.
You think we have enough angles?
Do you would you have a crew that has one person with each camera?
We would.
Operators, myself and two others. So I'm usually on these three, and then one.
And then there's an audio tech just manning audio.
Yeah, but guys, just goes to show you guys rule.
And then there's
but also you should just ask for 3 people's salary for this as well, of course.
Oh yeah, I should get paid triple for this.
There you go.
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
Yeah.
That'd be almost
You didn't think
a year.
You didn't think of that. Yeah, that'd be $10,000 a year.
Okay, all right, cool. Speaking of which, why did you decide to start White Desert?
Okay, so White Desert started back in 2005, and I was, at that time, this was my second big expedition across Antarctica, and I was with 3 friends, and we were stuck in a tiny little tent. There was a massive blizzard outside, and we just dreamt of this idea, what happens if we built a lodge, like in the middle of the Antarctic, and there was amazing food and beds and comfort and warmth, and we just daydreamed through all the things that we were missing.
And was this kind of a joke when you guys were talking about it, or did you guys actually think like, oh, let's see if we can do this?
No, this was a joke. This was like, imagine you've been together for 70 days, like you run out of stories and you run out of conversation. So like daydreaming about some amazing lodge was a good sort of way to pass the time. And then also I saw what people were doing in southern Africa, where they were going into sort of beautiful wildernesses in like Kruger Park or Botswana, and then they were building these sort of luxurious camps right in that place. So I wondered if people could do that in the interior of Antarctica. And why the interior is so special is because it's like only polar explorers and the odd scientists were seeing the interior. You could go by cruise ship, but I fell in love with the interior of the continent, and that's what I wanted to show people.
And like the steps involved from when you first had that idea with friends to actually starting to pursue figuring it out, or what?
Well, it was, I mean, like all these things start, just crazy optimism with a sort of field of dreams. I'll build a camp and maybe someone will come. That was literally it was probably the worst business plan ever devised. I mean, I literally bought 3 tents on the back of my credit card, paying terrible interest, set up a little camp in the middle of Antarctica next to this Russian runway, and kind of sort of like went, why is no one coming? You know, like I had 3 clients the first year, and
how'd that go?
It was brilliant because it was just fun, and we had no idea what we were doing, and they kind of mucked in, and there was just no professionalism whatsoever, and I really didn't understand I was in hospitality. It was just kind of like a polar explorer, and so what I deemed to be acceptable were like, there was no showers, there's no way to wash, you just got given a pack of wet wipes. That was it for the week. You can see these people like that's it for a week? It's like, yeah, that's it.
So you mentioned putting it on your credit card. I think you put the entire camp on the credit card. It was like a 17.5% interest rate. You remortgaged your house at one point. I believe you had a buddy who was a lawyer at some law firm who takes you out to lunch What does the friend say?
It just took the trouble to take me all the way to lunch to then tell me what a terrible idea it was to set up this thing called White Desert. I just remember just like the sort of cold sort of logic of a lawyer that just, in bullet point format over lunch tells me exactly how awful the idea is and how many times it's going to fail. But that is red rag to a bull for someone like me in terms of like that whole, it can't be done, it's like, I'm going to go the opposite way. And I think that the journey of the last 20 years of White Desert has probably been defined by tenacity of single most sort of useful trait is tenacity.
The process of actually figuring out the logistics entails what? Like for you specifically?
So usually the genesis is a problem or a challenge. Like you've got to get fuel from there to there. And how do you do it? And then you research and you go, well, no one's ever done that route before. And then you research some more and you go like, oh my God, you've got to go through huge crevasse fields. So there's like
when you're actually researching it, like what are you researching? Do you remember specifically that problem as an example, how you figured it out?
Yeah, you figure it out by thinking very laterally, usually, and then being quite fearless with your execution of it. When we, for instance, when we landed the Airbus down here, or when we landed the Gulfstream for the first time, that was you were sitting in the Gulfstream like, I hope this is going to work. It's like you kind of do all the preparations, you do all the research, you do everything, but then at some moment you've got to land a jet at 200 miles an hour on an ice runway. And I took the view that I should be on board the plane. I'm not going to let someone else do it. So yeah, it's scary. It's also like amazingly vindicating when it works.
What are you thinking when you're on the plane and it's getting ready to land?
Again, on the Airbus, that's the largest plane that's ever landed on ice. Mm-hmm. So sitting in the jump seat, put it this way, you put your harness on real tight, you buckle up, and you can see the pilots as well. When they're flying, they sort of wipe their hand for the sweat.
Oh, do they?
Yeah, we're coming in, and they kind of, we've all done our calculations, and everyone's done the sort of research, but it's just that moment when the wheels touch. It's like,
The importance of the runway and how you found that.
Yeah, that was seismic. So the original 3 tents that I referred to, that was, we were using a Russian company that had this big sort of Russian cargo plane. And again, the concept, I'm trying to set up a sort of luxury camp. And on board this Aleutian 76, it's like fuel drums. Like the toilet was a portaloo that was strapped down, and Dimitri would like throw a sandwich down the aisle, on these sort of, like cargo seats. And so the camp was fine, but over the years, these guys just got worse and worse and worse. And they didn't prioritize us. The prices kept on going up, and it just got...
Give some more color to that, because you've always kind of glossed over that, but they were kind of mother...
You're allowed to say that?
We can bleep it. We're in Antarctica.
We can literally do it like... The original guy that I started with was hilarious, called Alexei. And he was this big, larger-than-life Russian. And when I first presented this idea of setting up a camp, he was like, yes, okay, I like you very much, let's go. But the first time we actually met him, first time we met, I got in this sort of blacked out Mercedes in Cape Town. And big Alexei is sitting there, and he goes kind of like, so you've met Vasily, you've met Vladimir, you've met the other guys, now you're meeting me. And he goes, you want to do business? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. He goes, I need to see pictures of your children, know where they live. And I had this sort of wide-eyed effect. Then he goes, no, I make joke. You think Russians are like gangster the whole time. I make joke. And then as I sort of he goes, no, really, I want to see pictures. I joke again. And so he always was a step ahead of me. And he was this most fabulous guy and I started it off with him. And then he literally died of stress, and he just died of a heart attack from stress. Because what we do in Antarctica is pretty stressful. And I kind of vowed to not follow that same route. But the guys that then took over the company from him, I don't think much of them, no. And as someone said to me recently, all the pain I went through of that, actually was a blessing, because it led me to go, screw this, I'm out of here, I'm going to build my own runway. And then now our company is much bigger than theirs, and it's doing great. And actually a lot of guys that work for me all came from their company because they just had enough.
The best thing to, I'm sure, ever happened to you professionally was that pain and being forced to figure it out. But at the time, it could have
At the time,
singularly shut you down, right?
It sucked. Well, we were dealing with the monopoly, so we just had to just take it. Every time they did something to us, we were like, had to roll over because we had choice 1 of 1.
Right. And so how you figured out the runway was how?
So the runway was just a whole adventure in itself. We literally, I had heard whispers from some pilots who had heard someone else talk about the runway. There's this runway that used to exist back in 1998, I think, or 1997. So then I started sort of like researching a little bit more, and I got into a plane and started flying around here looking. And then we saw this big expanse of ice, because you need ice, not snow, for the runway. And there on the ground were these 2 old Skidoos that had been abandoned for 25 years. And then this cache of gear, like they'd just been left, like Raiders of the Lost Ark had just been left. So we're camping here, surveying everything. So we break open the cache, and we're like, yeah, I will take that mattress because I want to sleep on it, because I'm sleeping in a crappy tent. And we found these 2 bottles of whiskey that hadn't been drunk. And there was 17-year-old Lagavulin from back then, so it must have been 37 or whatever it was, years old now. 2 years later, when the Gulfstream first landed, we took an ice core sample from the runway, and then drunk the whiskey with this like 10,000-year-old ice. and it was what's so funny is the ice just didn't melt. It like been ice for 10,000 years. It was like, I ain't turning into water for anything.
Yeah.
So it was a really full circle. It was brilliant.
How many people would like to have a runway here right now?
It's having a runway here is a really big deal, in the sense that we're the first sort of commercial runway. There's another runway that you can come in with tourists, but yeah, big nations want runways, and it's and I mean really big nations.
China.
Yep, lots of them, absolutely. And because they want to control their own logistics, and they want to get to their own bases, and they don't want to rely on other people. So I didn't realize quite what a big deal it is. But also this runway is like situated at the perfect elevation, so it stays cold enough. It's got like winds. It's a perfect runway.
When the fuel comes in on the icebreaker, how do you get it to Wolf's Fang?
The journey of the fuel is one of the, you talk about logistical challenges. The journey of the fuel is just insane. An icebreaker has to come all the way down from Cape Town, 10 days on a massive icebreaker. It then hits this huge cliff, this vast 100 and something foot cliff. They then have to crane 20-ton or 25-ton fuel pods up 100 foot, so while the boat is moving like this, and then gently put them onto the back of our tractor train traverse. And then this team we've got have to drive 600 kilometers, going 10 kilometers an hour, over these crevasse fields. So crevasses are these huge, vast openings that would swallow a whole caterpillar, like easy, just swallow the whole thing. And there's these snow bridges that go over them. So you've got to constantly judge whether you can cross it, whether it's deep enough, safe enough. And so we use like a ground penetrating radar in front to check for the crevasses while these guys are driving up. And I mean, the fuel goes from sort of like $1 a litre to $7 a litre when it's at Wolf's Fang. And then these guys carry on driving for 2.5 months, non-stop, 10 kilometers an hour, every day, the whole time. And they get to our furthest refueling station. And there the fuel is over $60 a litre. So it's like more expensive than champagne.
And explain, to kind of give more color to that, how costs increase here, whether that's supplies or food.
Yeah, I mean, anything you try and take to Antarctica has got to go 4,200 kilometers from Cape Town, which is the nearest point in the real world, to our ice runway. So just the sheer logistics is everything. A can of Coke goes up to sort of $36.8. If someone goes to the bathroom, we have to get all our waste out. That costs us $5.6 for every time someone goes to the bathroom.
And elaborate what's involved with getting the 150 scientists you bring down each year to their bases.
Yeah, so
Because that's kind of become like almost another vertical of your business, right?
totally, and it makes complete sense. So, we've got an aircraft. Why fly a science aircraft and a tourist aircraft? We just, commingle them together.
Because when I came down a few years ago as a guest, we're on a Gulfstream.
Yeah.
This time we came down on an Airbus where the guests are in the front and then the back is filled with folks you're taking to bases.
Yeah, so I mean, we're like a hub, an airplane hub, and then you've got all these different science bases, and they're different nationalities. So the British, the Germans, the Swedish, the Finnish, lots of them. So we basically then use aircraft with skis in the interior, and then we fly them off to their bases. So it makes really good sense. It's really good, and they're off doing their ice core drilling and sampling and all sorts of scientific research.
And presumably made a big difference to you guys just business-wise.
Yeah, I mean, a tourist is, if you think our trip is like $100,000 for a week. So a scientist, it's a lot less money that we're charging. But at the same time, you need friends out here. Like there's always times where you're going to interdepend on each other. And for me, it made perfect sense to, rather than, the scientists previously were using that Russian cargo plane. And now for the same price, they get to come in on a modern, sophisticated Airbus with much better safety standards. It's got return range fuel. There's a lot of safety that went into that. It's a lot more comfortable, and we can do it.
And just helps in making the business even
Yeah.
more stable, presumably.
Totally.
So the staff that's involved in pulling all this off is how many people, and what are examples of all the different positions?
So we've got about 115 people on ice right now, which is insane when you think we have 2 tourism camps of 12 people each.
And how many people did you have your first year here?
The first ever year, we had 3. And we did everything. We were like, literally, so it was like cook meal, guide up mountain, clean toilet, do the whole thing. So now we have the 115 people here. But what I love about it is they're from 17 different nationalities. So we have these really wide spectrum of nationalities, which is also quite representative of what, Antarctica is all about. Antarctica's, no one owns this land. So it's really nice that there's this really big spectrum of different nationalities.
Take me through the process, if you don't mind, from start to finish of actually, but before I mention that, because you've mentioned the number of folks, 115, but give examples of just all the different positions.
Oh man, we have doctors, we have high mountain guides that are all French and slightly sort of belligerent. We have got pilots, more pilots. They're all Canadian and have to have maple syrup and really strong coffee. We've got general hands who are usually South Africans. So these are guys from sort of like barely seen snow before from sort of KwaZulu-Natal who are here just like wide-eyed, and they're like really tough, resilient farm boys, but they ain't seen snow before. So they're here. We have a whole Russian traverse teams that are just brilliant because they sort of hit the machine with a hammer and off they go again for another 5 days. We've got a really wide spectrum.
So when you want to create a new camp, take me from just the ideation phase to turning it into a reality and the kind of steps that are required.
I think it's really easy to sort of compromise your dreams on every single level, because then you kind of go back and you go, well, those guys build a base like that, and that's how they did it, and that's how they did it. So what we're having fun with right now is I think we really know the Antarctic environment. We know what kind of works and what's a showstopper. And here we've like got masses of wind. Like the wind is our main, I would say enemy, or you got to work with it. Then we've got cold, obviously, and then we've got snow accumulation. So we've got all these different things that are really atypical issues for where we operate. So I think what we're doing now is like we know the function. Now we're trying to create something which is just an amazing form. So it's really aesthetically pleasing. So the guest, the easiest thing to do is you just get a shipping container, you put a window in it and a door, and there's your thing. But what we want is something that is really, the guest can experience the outside and constantly sort of be reconnected to that wilderness. And so having huge glass is really important, because then you just get this view. The view out here is just amazing. You have that right in your face the whole time. And then there's also practical elements like huge windows create heat. because there's solar radiation. So you want the guests to kind of be wowed. And where I'm kind of going with it is a sort of like, I don't think anyone's done sort of like an organic form metal base. I don't know.
Which is what we were exploring with you yesterday.
Yesterday we were exploring the site.
Yeah.
So that, I think that site is like the most dramatic. That site's just amazing. Like the views, it's surreal, and this is Antarctica. So like, you know, you want people to just blow their socks off when they see that view. You got to feel it in the same way that other guests will do, you know, like sharing that. Like, it's just so titanically big, and you just stand there feeling humbled. And imagine if we could build something like super modern and interesting, but in that space.
The single hardest part throughout the process of building a camp is what?
I mean, think of 1 liter of fuel and how it has to get from the coast to here and how expensive that is. So then times that by every single building material, from a hammer to a nail, everything has to come out. And yeah, I mean, there's usually just a lot of hope and a lot of optimism thrown in there and a lot of hard work. And then you get like hit by a blizzard, and the blizzard undoes all your work, or you're halfway through constructing something and then a massive blizzard hits. So
is there something that comes to mind over the years of building camps that was like the worst example of what could go wrong?
yeah, we had Witchaway Camp, we had 17 days before the Jordanian royal family were arriving. And we literally arrived in Antarctica with piles and piles of wood and fiberglass. And the team, with seriously high winds, we just had to work almost 24/7. Like, we worked like 21-hour days. And when the Jordanians arrived, they, you know, leant up against a wall, and like there's wet paint all over their jacket from where we just like, everything was sort of happening simultaneously. And yeah, it's just like, I don't know, somehow you just make it work.
How many camps do you want?
I don't think I want lots. I think it's about sort of demand, and I want to keep the camps really small. So what's really important to me, like you got yesterday, and which I still got yesterday, is that moment of discovery. And I really mean that. That's if I build a hotel, which I wouldn't get permission for anyway, but if I build a hotel with 400 rooms, like that would just ruin every element of what is so special about this place. So having small camps of like 12 people, that's where you get the magic.
If you could, you know, predict the future and envision any number of camps, is it one more? Is it 5 more? Or is it...
I don't know.
Well, where's your head at now?
My head's at now that I'd like to do one more camp, because actually we've got so many scientists coming in. They've kind of like pushed out, displaced our tourists. So we need to find... From Wolfsfang, yeah.
Which was like your, well, I guess Witchaway was the original, but
yes.
Wolfsfang was kind of the next one, right?
Yeah, exactly. So kind of, I think one more is where I am. And then also it's like, how many grey hairs do I want? You know, it's like, how long can I keep doing this? But I think that when I feel like I've still got more to do, you know, I'll do more. I don't want to build a proliferation of camps, but I think that in these different environments, it's so different, you know, like from Witchaway to Echo to then the new place that we were at yesterday, the environments are really different.
Well, I mean, speaking of the gray hair, because I talked to a number of people close to you as part of the prep for this, as you know, as I understand it, from like 2015 to 2020, your family was like reasonably concerned for you because of the extent to which you were working. You know, never took a day off. As they said it, the level of stress was to an unhealthy degree. Elaborate a little on kind of that period. Give a little color to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think like your 30s, especially, and this is actually early 40s you're talking about there, but your 30s is sort of defined by, you know, working your ass off, usually having kids, not getting any sleep, trying to do something. So I think not sleeping, and, you know, I'd wake up every night at 2 a.m. and work till 5 a.m. every, you know, that was just standard. And then the kids would come in at like 6 a.m. and off you go to work again, you know, repeat. So that period of life, I think every entrepreneur has that, you know, where you're sweating bullets because at 2 a.m. you don't have the money to pay the payroll or the whatever the hell it is. So I think that's part of and function of being an entrepreneur. Secondly, inherently what is happening out here is high stress. I mean, we're landing a 300,000 pound bit of metal that is traveling at 200 miles an hour onto a nice runway in a highly mercurial environment. Like the weather patterns change, blizzards hit, and then we've got really rich, demanding clients that then to fuse into that. So,
But is there a single moment that comes to mind that was as close as you got to just your breaking point?
I think it's kind of like boiling the frog. You know what I mean? You put the frog in the water when it's cold and you heat it up. And so you don't realize quite how much stress you're under because it's incremental. And I didn't have a sort of, classic sort of panic attack breakdown, but I was definitely, my elasticity had definitely gone.
How was that visible in you at the time to those close to you?
I think that's just crazy levels of fatigue, snappy, and also sort of what I didn't like about that period of my life particularly was how much work took me away from the rest of life. Do you know what I mean? It's like
Sure.
Work absorbed so much of my soul that everything else started to get lost in that. So I'm really glad that we've kind of plateaued, and I kind of 3 years ago, in fact, I do remember the defining moment. In fact, you asked for a defining moment. I got exactly the one. COVID hit. And so...
And your dad said COVID had you on your knees and took you to the very edge.
Yeah, COVID sucked. COVID sucked because it was like, there's no aviation because people aren't traveling, and then there's no travel and tourism. So that there's sort of two things.
But even just backing up momentarily, predating that, there were periods where you're on flight calls all night, working all day. There was one season even predating COVID where you guys were battered by weather. So, I mean, it wasn't even just COVID, right?
Yeah, but on the COVID season, which I've definitely tried to get blank out of my mind, and when I have therapy one day, I'm sure it'll come flooding back and I'll start shaking. But that was COVID. So then the new variant of Omicron, so they started shutting down South Africa, where we operate from. And then we had 6 full-bore blizzards hit our camps and knocked out, like the generators, knocked out all sorts of stuff. So we've got people here who are in a really high-stress environment. No electricity, stuff like that. So we're trying to get everything fixed. And then the next storm would just come and just destroy us again. And then they'd pick themselves up. Next one, 6 times that happened. And then simultaneously, we had 6 technical faults with the aircraft. So we load everybody up, we're ready to do a mission, and then the aircraft engine doesn't start or whatever it was. So that was the moment where, and I kind of at that stage of my life was just like the only thing I could think to do was just work harder. You're in that sort of mindset of just, I need to just work longer and harder and harder and longer.
Yeah, but there's a point in which you can't physically do any more than you're already doing.
Yeah, there is. And I came to that sort of epiphany of like, doesn't matter how many hours I work, I will still not be done and still have more work to do, which is, I think many entrepreneurs probably get to that moment.
So that realization for you impacted you how at that time?
Stress is a terrible thing, and like I lost weight and aged and got more grey hairs, and
like genuinely, could you see that in yourself?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure my skin would look better. I think that if a prolonged period of a decade of not sleeping properly and working your ass off is probably not good for your health. Yeah, I just hope that I can rebound from that properly and all the rest.
What was the moment where you felt like you could take a breath for the first time?
Only recently, like only in the last sort of say 6-8 months, and that's just
really
yeah. I feel really different in myself. Maybe a year, just because I said, look, I don't care if the bottom line doesn't matter anymore. I'm gonna just spend $1 million on new staff. So we got new staff, new people, and it took 2 years for them to kind of actually take responsibility and really and then suddenly I literally went to a chiropractor once and he kind of went and my whole body went And I hadn't breathed properly. I hadn't taken a breath for like sort of like 4 months. Like I was just breathing this really shallow kind of like fight or flight sort of panicky breathing. And that moment was just like, Jesus, okay, I need to redress. And I had always in the back of my head, Alexei, you know, who I told you died from stress. So I already had that kind of from a heart attack. And I just sort of like went, I will not let my kids kind of like, you know, be left alone. And I don't want them to remember a sort of tired, gaunt, like graying, slightly snappy guy. I want them to remember all the fun stuff of like going yesterday into the mountains and how alive I felt. That's exactly what I want to take my kids on.
Yeah, but you know, you say you didn't care about the bottom line. I mean, you kind of do though, right? I mean, but like there had to be something you were seeing that as you started hiring people, it helped with the bottom line too, so it became a risk worth taking.
You say I didn't care about the bottom line. What I mean by that is
I mean, like you don't want to go broke. And
no, you know,
right.
going
like,
broke is there is an extreme, but like,
right.
but like, absolutely. Would you like $1 million in your pocket or your mental health? I very much took it was like, screw the $1 million. What the hell am I doing this for? And I think that that's a really important thing. You know, people have asked me whether I want to sell White Desert and what's your number. I'm kind of like, it's not been my motivation. I get off on like finding a solution to some crazy logistical challenge and to going into some beautifully remote place. That's what fires me up. If you pay me $10 million extra for buying the company, that doesn't really float me.
So since you hired the additional staff, it's impacted the company.
Huge.
And the bottom line. How?
Yeah. And again, it's, and you know, like, you know, when you sort of like this wonderful thing called retrospect. So it all feels so new and like scary and sort of crazy to the individual. But this is a pretty well-worn sort of entrepreneurial life cycle. You know, then you hire people, they come online, they actually lift the weight off you and all that sort of stuff. They run the business better than you. And so now White Desert's doing better than ever because there's all these people underneath that are running it properly that really give a shit about HR or really give a shit about stuff that I don't care about. And so, you know, it works. You need that support structure.
When do you think you sell?
I think I'll sell when I feel I have nothing more to give here. And right now I feel like I've got a lot more to give.
But I would imagine the more success you
or when
have...
I'm broke.
but the flip side of that is I would imagine the more success you have, the more you kind of flirt with those thoughts, right?
I realize that this is not like a unicorn that will just keep growing and growing and being amazing forever. At some stage it will probably plateau a bit or something will happen. So you want to obviously sell prior to that.
But you're just kind of getting into the great years, right?
Yeah, I feel like I'm getting into the great years. The business is running really well. I feel like we've got some really exciting expansion that I want to lead. I want to lead it. I don't want to sort of sell it to somebody else and go, that wasn't quite my dream. You just, you know, I want to lead that expansion and make it bigger and better. And really, I go back to it like, money's not really my most important thing. You know, it's like having and yes, I want it to be successful. I want, if someone bought this company, I'd want them to pay me the fair dues for all the hundreds and thousands of hours of hard work I put into it. And so it's got to be fair. But it's not something like, we never grew White Desert with a view to sell it in 3 years' time. We never had a strategy to sell. Because it didn't grow like that, it grew organically. And actually that's why I think the business is so damn cool. And why our brand is so damn cool is because we were really unstrategic in the way we grew. We just grew what we thought was cool and what we did. And we kind of said, screw the rest of you.
Your buddy Tom, who's also an investor in White Desert, told me he's been trying to get you to hold off on selling because he thinks it'll be worth 5 times what it is right now. Your dad, on the other hand, says for sure you'll have sold it in 5 years. Your thoughts?
I don't know. I think that what would I do after this would be an interesting one. I have got to a wonderful situation where at White Desert I'm able to go and do the visionary, interesting stuff. Like we've got this trips through Peru to Patagonia using our DC-3 Basilers, which is like a 1940s glamour meets Indiana Jones. Coolest damn trip ever. So I get to design all of those things.
And is that only in the past 6 to 9 months that you've been talking about, where stuff has kind of just started to ease up and the stress go away a
because
little
before
bit?
I'm running the company, but the day-to-day, and your nose is like right on the grindstone, and you're looking absolutely at your feet. And now just to be able to look at the horizon is really interesting also, because like the executive team like have issues. I'm looking at the horizon and feeling far more 2, 3, 4 years. They're on the day-to-day, and so their challenges at that point seem far more obvious to me than to them, because they've got their head right in it. So I think it's exactly the right move, and that gives me the sort of latitude and freedom to do some really cool stuff. And that's like building a new camp, going on doing these new adventures in South America. Yeah, and that's fun.
And so you kind of in a way answered it, because your dad says now you kind of have the 9 to 5 job you never wanted, because as the business has become more stable, the byproduct of that is it becoming more corporate.
It does feel weird when people are like, what is White Desert? Well, in the old days, it was 3 of us in like a garage, like doing, and now it has like protocol and MOs and documents. And so, but that's the joy of leaving it to other people. I said that I invested all this money in having amazing staff come through. Now that they have come up and now are leading things, it's genuine. It's not. They have responsibility in loads and loads of areas. I get involved with certain things, but actually I find it completely the opposite to what my dad's talking about. I don't feel 9 to 5 at all. I feel like the horizons are opening up, and there's lots more to do.
Because, like, on one hand, if you sell now, you get a nice paycheck. On the other hand, you deprive yourself of the joy of being able to get back to some of the exploratory stuff you love now that the business has kind of stabilized.
I guess it's whether I want to do more exploring stuff in Antarctica or in South America. You know what? I don't know. And maybe the idea.
But that's something you think about now, though.
It is. But it's also like having a fat pile of money in a bank account is great, and gives you freedom and all those sorts of things. But I don't know whether I want to retire or do something completely new. There's a lot of new and stuff to do here that I don't feel I want to completely shut this door and then go on to something completely different.
How often do you go back and forth?
A lot, as you can tell. Do you? Yeah, today's like Friday. This is me feeling really positive about White Desert. Tomorrow I'll be cataclysmic. Yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
So I want to take you back to when you were a kid growing up. You're 7 or 8 years old, and as I understand it, you kind of got left behind in school a bit. You didn't learn to read properly. A teacher says to your mom, Patrick isn't very clever.
Yeah.
Elaborate on that.
Well, I'm going to blame everyone but myself. I like the idea of no accountability. That's always good. No, I mean, like I went to a little tiny village school in the middle of England where the teacher didn't teach anything. So, I didn't learn to speak very well. And
And what does that mean?
My 2 older sisters just spoke for me. So I'd sort of sit like a mute in the, and then I didn't get taught very well. So I think it's probably quite valid concerns. Oh, and then I had my adenoids taken out because my parents thought I was deaf. I wasn't deaf. I was just really dreamy. And I used to just think about all sorts of dreamy things, but I actually underwent surgery to get my adenoids taken out.
And that caused what?
Well, it was supposed to fix my hearing, but my hearing was just fine. It was the fact that I was up in the clouds dreaming of silly things all day long that was the issue.
And so you grew up in a kind of a small village when you guys were kids.
Yeah.
Dog walks turned into, I think, time by the quarries. There were, slingshots, air pistols. Give a little color to that time.
I grew up in a little village in rural England. And it was really wholesome, like it was take the dog, take the bike, go down to the lakes. Usually involve constructing some kind of weaponry because I'm a boy and like rabbit hunting with a terrible spear I've made from a sapling. And John, who's here looking for camps with me, was sort of my partner in crime. And
Because you guys have known each other since you were like 4
yeah,
or something?
yeah, absolutely. So we've known each other for a very long time, and it was really good. You know, it was something that was I look back on it very fondly. Going to boarding school, I think I went far too young.
How old?
I was, I think, 7 at the time.
And why do you feel you went too young?
I don't think anyone should go to boarding school at 7 years old. Just because it's really good if you want to like create polar explorers, because it's like you have to be really self-reliant, you have to be really tenacious, you have to sort of bury your feelings in and just keep driving forward. Super useful if you want to be a polar explorer. If you want to be a well-rounded kind of family man and actually have an intimate relationship, not the best.
How has being at boarding school and teaching you to kind of bury your feelings in, you think impacted you long term?
I think going to school very, very young like that, to a boarding school, means you don't hang around with your family, with your parents, and learn a lot about, you know, conflict resolution in a positive way, and how grown-ups can coexist, you know, because we would always come back from holiday and it'd be like the greatest thing in the world to be home again. And you sort of have this utopic vision of home rather than actually a functional of the way life should operate. So I think that unwinding that in my own family was definitely, took some learning.
What were the situations that kind of forced you to learn to unwind that?
Well, I mean, culminating in a divorce by not. So I say that glibly, but I mean, as an example, I think a lot of the people I hire here and and myself are very good in a crisis. So, you know, crisis happens, alarm bells sound, like I check the time, I've got a plan, I'm in action, I'm going like that. So that's great if there's a crisis. It's not amazing if like you're in ordinary life and your partner says, shall we have chicken or fish tonight? And you go deep down and you say like, I don't care either way. And then you don't respond, and it's important for them. And I'm not saying chicken and fish is important for, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just any other thing that's not a crisis. My daughter comes up and says, I'm having a fight with Sally or whatever. It's like actually giving a shit what they're telling you and actually listening. It's a really big deal that Sally picked on your daughter, or that she wants to have a, you know, a blue jumper or a pink jumper or whatever, because she's 5 years old, and it's a really big deal in her world. And so actually caring, the house doesn't always need to be on fire for you to give it, you know, like, and that's been a really wonderful transition. I really mean that. Like, I'm really glad that I'm older and I get to see how I was earlier, and now I can really like enjoy that connectivity.
And like, in what ways do you see you're different now when it comes to that sort of stuff?
Because I give a shit. I actually care, and I really, to my bones, I mean, like I care. And before it was slightly lip service, or I kind of like, yeah, you know, and I pretend to care, quite good at pretending to care. And now I think it's wonderful, because that's how relationships are formed, of actually really deeply caring.
And why do you think you can draw a direct line from those situations to boarding school?
Because in boarding school, you often just bottle it all up, and you just kind of, because you don't, you're going to get bullied or picked on if you start showing your emotions the whole time. It's not a positive emotional experience. It's about being tough and about being cool and about being all those things. And teenagers can be vile to each other, you know, and it's sort of Lord of the Fliesy quite a bit, and you've got to sort of be tough and strong. And that doesn't sort of go hand in glove with being emotionally aware.
So then what's the process entailed for you with like figuring out how to unwind that?
Yeah. It has been learning, and I really mean that. It has been something I've had to like actively learn. And
like,
it's not
what do you specifically, like what will you do? Like in terms of
like
learning.
understanding why someone is shouting at you, and the reason they're shouting at you is because you're not caring about the questions they're asking, and you're just fobbing it off, and you're just like, I don't care, you know, like it doesn't, whatever. Where's the crisis? There's no crisis. In which case, I just kind of switch off. So like understanding that.
And when you like switch off, what does switching off mean for you?
Switching off, either daydreaming or not giving proper answers or not really care. It's the caring. So not really caring.
What do you think you learned from your dad?
My dad's fabulous. I mean, who gets their aerobatics license at the age of 78? What a lunatic.
So Bex, your sister, when I was talking to her the other day on the phone, said you really influenced your dad in a lot of ways.
You know, half off, right? So, I mean, Dad is firstly always the first one to say yes to an adventure, so that anything doesn't faze him. So he came here to Wolfsfang when there was nothing on that first original trip, and the other guys who were with me, like the French High Mountain guides, they couldn't believe how able he was just to like, we're changing plans, we're doing this, all the things that old people kind of get more stiff and rigid about. He was just like, okay, cool, you know, we're moving it. So that attribute and that desire to be flexible and see the world and is wonderful. But also more than that, my dad is really enjoys people. He really enjoys listening to stories and actually enjoys telling his own stories more than anything else. But
You're a pretty good storyteller yourself.
No, I tell the same stories like my dad. I mean, there's only so much you can get away from genetics.
Which interestingly, folks close to you told me like you're kind of the energy of the room whenever you're there, but you're also very much an introvert.
Yeah, I think I do like being by myself. I do find, especially in amazing environments like this, I get a lot of energy from that. I pull a lot of clarity from that. Yeah, I'm a bit loud sometimes.
So you were talking about your dad though.
Yeah, I told my dad. So no, he nothing makes him happier. Like I think Dad's idea of heaven would be like driving an old vintage car that has broken down somewhere that he's had to fix to a vineyard in the middle of nowhere that no one goes to talk to the winemaker to get some amazing Chardonnay or something with a few of his friends. I mean, I think that would be kind of like, so it's really lovely, that sort of importance on just having a good time. And I don't mean like a raucous good time of just enjoying life, actually. He's very good at enjoying life and taking a beat and kind of seeing what's good in life.
And explain what he does with the cars.
The cars, I mean, he takes a 1957 Austin Healey and drives it from London to Sydney, like with my mother at the time. She's passed away. But they would do these, you know, and go Alaska to Panama, go across Burma, go across all these wild places. The Karakoram Highway. Imagine going through Pakistan up into, and this is in a 1957 car that is like breaks down all the time. It's just, that's the whole thing. It's just an adventure.
And he does it why?
He does it because first, he loves the old cars. Secondly, it's an excuse to go and see really beautiful places. But also the atmosphere, when you arrive in a tiny Chinese village in a 1957 car, people just go nuts. And it's just like a really exciting way to travel. Not comfortable, but I did a trip with him through Namibia just recently. And there the car's like skidding on the desert roads the whole time. It's hot, there's dust everywhere. And you know, we'd get in after sort of 6 hours of like traveling old school, you know, like and the guys in the sort of support team was there with, you know, air conditioned Land Rovers and, you know, pneumatic seats and a coffee. And it's kind of like, yeah, I prefer to travel the way we did it. We did it actually. It's like, I like that old school vintage travel.
So there's a quote that was told to me, behind every successful man is a successful Rottweiler. What does that mean?
My dad was the front man and set up his own business, but my mother was steely. She was very strong. She was very willing to take risks and very hard, and I mean hard in a tough way. She's not to be underestimated. She was like 5'3" with blonde hair, and you know you could easily underestimate. And
But like hard in a tough way means what?
To see things through, conviction, you know, like tenacious, absolutely unwavering. She was tough like that, and in a really positive way. I don't mean tough like sort of, you know, nasty mean. I mean like when she saw her sights on something, and the idea also is like there's not a moment in life when you can relax. You have to be on it, doing something, creating, being productive at any moment. So these are characteristics that have definitely distilled in me. And again, super useful if you want to be a polar explorer.
If not for her, you think your dad would be where?
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, who knows? Definitely not as far as he is now, you know. And I think that that's you do need when you're launching into the abyss. Sometimes you do need somebody to steady you and say you're doing the right thing. Keep going.
What do you think you learned from her?
All of those qualities I just mentioned. Literally, yeah. I mean, like never sitting still, always being productive, being slightly guilty if you ever did sit still, and
You actually felt that way?
hell yeah, yeah. Like sitting on a sofa and watching TV. Are you kidding me? That was like completely not allowed. And so also what I did learn from my mum as well was that I was always dirty from playing with John, and so I even now in my own house I still sit on the floor. So,
really?
yeah, I was never allowed on the sofas. So my mum was always dirty. So my mum was like, I was allowed to put my back against the sofa. That was as much. But even now, I own the bloody house and I own the damn couch.
And you have the like bachelor life.
Yeah,
now,
and I sit on the floor. I still do. It's funny how it's indoctrinated her.
So I think your mom got sick, I think, when she was 62, brain cancer, passed away a few years later. What do you think going through that with her taught you?
I mean, death is about as ugly as it gets in every way. And it's one of the things that humans are really weird and don't talk about. And just to be tangential for a second, like expeditions taught me that I was going to die quite early. You can die, like it's possible.
You've had a lot of friends die on
not lots,
expeditions.
but I've had friends. And so that like what's important in life. Don't sweat the damn color of the kitchen. Doesn't matter that much. There's much more important things, and so I think that it's going to happen, and I think that it can happen real suddenly, or like my mother, it took 4 or 5 years, and she fought it again, tenacity, again, that sort of strength. I think the longest anyone had ever had her type of cancer was like 2 years, and she did like 4.5. But watching a slow deterioration of someone you love is just, even after waiting for 4.5 years for it to happen, it smacks you and it's a huge surprise.
What was involved with getting through that for you?
I think that it's just this unknown. You feel very lost and very at sea, and you're all trying to comfort each other, but no one really knows how to do that because it's so personal. It's so sort of like right in your face. I mean, when Mum was just about to go, Dad and I rushed back from the mountains because we'd been in the mountains somewhere. And I rushed into the room and Mum was literally on the very last moment. And I was expecting some great words, some sort of bit of wisdom from her life. And she always used to have the cats kind of like under the duvet with her, the Siamese cats. And as I sat down to comfort her and go, "Hey, Mum," like this, she said, "Don't sit on the cats." Like that was her last words before to me. And I was like, wow, I wonder if that's got some special meaning or if she's being no, she's being literal. Just don't sit on the cats. So, yeah, it's something that it's a journey that we all have to go through. And the only good bit of it is that idea that it's a natural progression. I will very hopefully die long before my children. And
she was still young, though, like quite young.
She said to me the last time I blinked, I was 25 years old. And that's this wonderful fragility. It's so ephemeral life. It's such a little spark. And yet we wander around in our arrogance, feeling like it's going to last forever. So I think that's the lesson. Goes by quick, real quick.
Your sister Bex was telling me after her passing, there was kind of a reorienting of the family, figuring out the new dynamic, especially for you and your dad specifically. How so? I
don't know myself.
Okay.
Yeah. You have to ask her maybe. I don't know. I mean, I think, Dad was also retiring.
Yeah.
And there's a natural age thing as well. You come to, I'm 49 now, just, not 50. And you come to a certain age where you are the high point in the pyramid. Your parents are older and grayer and more fragile, and your children aren't there yet. So you got to man up and take the sort of the tough seat, I guess.
And that's turned into what for you?
No, well, I also have 2 older sisters, so there's not a chance in the world that they're going to accept that. But you know what I mean? It's like the 3 of us have to, like, we're now got the energy, got the time, got the money, and all the rest.
So I want to kind of talk about how you were kind of influenced early on that led you to kind of pursuing this life that you now have. And I think you were 17 years old, a Royal Geographical Society talk. What was it about that was so impactful to you?
So I saw Sir Ranulph Fiennes talk about doing his Trans-Globe expedition. And there's this guy who went off and did this incredible journey, right? And it was really weird. I sat there at 17 years old and went, why can't I do that? Like, why am I going to like go and be a lawyer or an accountant or whatever the hell it is? Like I want to do what he was experiencing. So just putting myself out there. And I think that that's maybe the greatest lesson my mum taught me, is that the idea of like, why not? You can go do it. Go for it. So at the age of 23, we left university, and there was a load of mountains in Kyrgyzstan that no one had ever climbed before. So we were like, why not? Let's go. And we spent 6 weeks or something climbing in Kyrgyzstan.
Before I ask you about that, what did you study in college, and why?
I studied ancient history with a little bit of philosophy.
For any reason in particular, or you just didn't know what else to do?
Yeah, a little bit of that.
Yeah.
I do like history. I also didn't have any like wildly vocational plans. Like I didn't want to be a doctor or, astronaut, or couldn't have been. So yeah, I art subjects. I was really into. I like writing. I'd come a long way from my sort of 7-year-old days. And,
you can read now.
I struggle. I read out loud, So, yeah, I thought it was actually really interesting. I like the Greeks and the Romans and all that jazz, but like entirely unhelpful when looking for a job.
You were kind of a little lost after university, right?
Yeah, I think so. I went down to Namibia and spent 4 months working on rhino projects, so translocating rhino and moving rhino. I met a guy in a bar who said, do you want to run a marathon for Save the Rhino? And I was like, yeah, sounds great. So we went to New York, ran a marathon, and then I kind of like raised this money and thought, well, I want to see where it's going to be spent. I don't want it to be squandered or, stolen or whatever. And the guy said, if you can get to this place in Namibia, you can get a job. So I was like, yeah, cool. So off we went.
And this was like an anti-poaching unit? Or?
Yeah. Well, we weren't with it. We were working like a little bit with them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what was the day-to-day there?
The day-to-day was I mean, on the rhino days when we had those, because it was all about the money for the helicopter, it was wild. Literally, we would track...
Wait, and what do you mean all about the money for the helicopter?
Well, because the park only had certain amounts of money, so they could only do the rhino tagging and stuff on certain days because they couldn't fly the helicopter because they didn't have enough money. Mm-hmm. So on the days when they did, that was wild day. That was like, we would go into the bush, Mike and I, one other guy with us, and we would go and track rhino spoor looking for rhino, and then we'd get really close to the rhino, so like really close, radio in the helicopter that would then come in, and then the helicopter would circle over above, the rhino would get spooked and they'd dart it, and then there would be just madness go on because this rhino is pissed and it's going through the bush, and this is a 2.5 or 2.2 ton animal. We would climb trees immediately and get the hell out of there while this animal's been darted, and it would run off in different directions. Then the horses would chase it because there were other guys that were mounted. And then...
Any close calls?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like one guy, Moses, jumped up the tree and was like holding onto the branch, and the rhino's horn was underneath him like that. And for some reason, Moses thought it'd be a great idea to take his binoculars off and try and hit the rhino on the top of the head. And... like it was from a cartoon, he was quite fat, and so the tree started like as this rhino was going mental underneath him.
So what happened?
The rhino then got distracted,
okay.
and literally he just sort of like gently fell off the tree and just collapsed on the ground in fear. But like there's another one where the helicopter darted, and then the rhino was passed out, and then the vets and the medics come in and they do all their stuff. And there was this like fire break that went on for ages, and the helicopter landed over there. All fine, no problem. and then you give the drug. So Mike and I's job was to always, while the vet would put in the like wake up serum, we would take off the visor from the rhino, because you put it on a visor to stop it getting traumatized or less traumatized. And we would grab it, and then when this stuff hit, this thing would wake up immediately, like poof, like this, and then it's pissed and disoriented. And so we would literally sprint to the back of this bucky, this 4x4, and the other guys would be on the back of them with their arms like this. And as you jumped at them, they would just grab you like this, and then the car would drive away. And then this one, it was bonkers. And then this one rhino just ran down the fire break towards the helicopter. And the guy's like, "Take off, Atty, take off now." And you know how slowly a helicopter blade goes like, well, this rhino's like, dun, 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 and it's just getting worse and worse. And Atty's like, and this thing would be, this is a little Robinson helicopter. This rhino would have just gone through it.
Right.
And eventually one of the trucks managed to get in front of the helicopter and steer off the rhino, and Atty just sort of like shut down the engines and sort of walked outside and had a cigarette. It was like, Jesus Christ. Yeah, so that was Namibia.
And you did that for how long?
I did that for about 4 or 5 months.
What did being a freelance TV producer entail?
Jesus, well, you tell me, it's your job. It was that was kind of like I was doing extreme sports, so I'd just like find a cool sport that I liked and then film it, and that just meant that I was up in the mountains or under the ocean or somewhere interesting and new while these crazy people did whatever they were doing. So it was kind of fun.
Your university friend influenced you how?
So Tom Avery was the first one that said to us, let's go to Kyrgyzstan and go and find, or I've found these mountains no one's climbed before. So he was very much instrumental in that process of going somewhere new. Yeah. And then we skied to the South Pole together.
Your favorite part of the unclimbed mountains there, or rafting down the uncharted rivers in the Amazon?
Yeah, so there was like for about a decade, there was a core of us that would sort of change. It was just doing something new. That was the bit. So whether it was, as you say, kayaking down a river in the Amazon, which was for the New York Times, whether it was...
it was for the New York Times because you needed the trip funded, and that was an avenue to get money. Exactly.
Well, actually, my book agent at the time basically just said, "Oh, I've got a new job for you." And I was like, "Where is it?" And he goes, "Oh, it's in Africa." And I was like, "Where?" And he goes, "Suriname." I was like, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure Suriname's not in Africa." And he's like, "You'll be great. You'll be great. You'll be fantastic. Just put the phone down." So yeah, I wrote an article for the New York Times. Which was cool, and then and that was great. It was a river rafting adventure, but like I knew absolutely nothing about canoeing. And then I was in the Congo for a bit with the pygmies, which was awesome. Net hunting with them. That was research for one of my books, and I went with this guy called Ollie, who's an explorer, jungle explorer. So I sort of wanted to take him into a polar environment, and he said he'd take me into the sort of jungle. And the pygmies are like something from legend, and you go out there, into the Intruri forest, which is like the Heart of Darkness style, middle of the Congo, huge canopy, vast, endless forest, and these guys are living like prehistorically, like literally with in little huts which are leaves that are in a little dome. They're wearing like literally a loincloth, and they are using poison darts and poison arrows to go hunting each day in the forest. And it's just like, wow. And they would smoke a lot of weed, and then we would charge off into the forest with poison weaponry. It was, what could go wrong?
And so what would happen?
Well, we're like hunting. So they would put nets out along the elephant trails and then chase any game like impala or any kind of little buckies would then go into the nets. And that was your dinner.
How was the weed?
How's the weed? Yeah, kind of strong. Yeah, and then they sort of paint you up and sort of like be like off we go. But then like that was the thing where I really saw how like this is a person that lives absolutely in tune with nature. I'm like 5'11" and I think I'm relatively nimble. I would follow these guys through the forest, and I was like a charging rhino. I was like this lumbering, incapable, noisy, lost hungry, mosquito-ridden, like it was just, and these guys just off they go. It was amazing to see.
How about getting bit by a
Oh,
piranha?
my favorite story. Yeah.
Genuinely?
Yeah. It's like I've got to show my children that I'm a, macho hero, and I've got a piranha bite.
Do you actually, is there a scar on you from it?
Like really annoyingly, the scars faded quite
Okay.
a lot. So I'm really put out by that. Yeah. I was in the Amazon, and it just took it was a red piranha as well. There's a red-eyed or whatever they are, but it's a big sucker. It's like this sort of size, and it had a proper onto me, and I lay on the banks of the river while my friend stitched up my foot, and caught another piranha with my fishing rod. I cut its head off and boiled it, and I've still got it at home. So I kind of feel one all, evens.
And it was borderline, like something quite severe could have happened, right?
It's the Amazon, like the jungle. I think that's why I like polar explorations, because there's nothing here to bite you or eat you or try and kill you.
But with the piranha, like you kind of got lucky, right?
No, I think I was fine. It was. I mean, obviously, that's if there weren't lots of other piranha in the river, which there probably were. So, no, I mean, that was the thing that blew my mind about like the Amazon rainforest. It's just like there's so much life, but like it's really hard to be there. Like you get bitten and snakes and just everything.
So you're in your mid-20s and you get the idea with three of your buddies to ski and kite to the South Pole. I think there'd been only something like 12 people that had done it before. A number of folks had died and in the process. So like, why decide to do it?
So there were two different expeditions. The first one was where we ski to the South Pole, and then a couple of those guys went to the North Pole, and they went to ski to the North Pole, and I went back and then did a full traverse of the Antarctic continent. So I think 11 people had ever traversed Antarctica before. What I liked about the adventure was the idea of following Amundsen's route, who's the first guy to the South Pole, follow his route up through these monumental mountains to the South Pole, and then use these kites to kite ski across the other side.
And why did you like that idea?
Just because it's super dynamic. The first trip we did to the South Pole, skiing across the high polar plateau, you've been up there to the South Pole, it's endless white. So like pulling a sled.
And freezing.
And minus 35 degrees. Yeah, it's cold. So like a long expedition is literally grueling. You are pulling a sled which weighs 220 pounds day after day after day. I mean, the first trip took us 46 days. And you're losing weight and you're eating 4,500 calories a day, but you're burning like 9, 10, 11, 12. So you're starving.
And explain the slabs of butter.
Well, you're desperate for fat. So your body switches from normal tastes into just hankering, craving for like fat, because you're burning all your own body's fat. So butter becomes like the most delicious thing you've ever eaten. It tastes like amazing cheese. Had you given me caviar on a souffle with something else expensive, it would just be like, whatever. Like raw fat is what you're after. Yeah, it's wild. But that flat and white is what it is. It's flat and white and it's grueling. And I wanted an expedition that was interesting. So to go through the mountains, to go through the crevasse fields is really interesting. To then get to the South Pole man hauling was tough, but then to pick up kites and then to kite ski across the other side, no one had ever done that before. And that was really exciting.
What about it excited you?
This is back in 2004. So like kite surfing technology was not great. And so they were super dangerous, but harnessing the wind, of which Antarctica has obviously a lot of it, to then, you're normally doing 2.1 nautical miles an hour with a lot of hard work, pulling this damn sled. Now we could launch these kites and we could go, I mean, when I was kiting across Greenland, we were going 55 kilometers an hour. Like we were just flying across. Yeah. So you can cover insane distances. But as I say, it's colder, it's more dangerous, a lot more dangerous. But it's really efficient.
What was the best part of that trip and what was the worst part?
The best part was being amongst the ghosts of like Amundsen going up through the Transantarctic. No one had been up there since him. and all our heroes, like we're all sort of, love the early explorers, the Shackleton Scott, all that stuff. And to sort of be in that silence, that was really, and imagine like silence, but in a vast part of the mountain range that no one had been in since then, with these huge crevasses and these snow bridges, and the landscape's wild, and it's just this silence. It's like you've just melted into the environment around and you're one with it. And it's just this crazy feeling of connectivity. It's wild. Yeah.
And the worst part of it?
The worst part was when we were kiting, we would kite when the wind was good. And so we would sometimes kite for 10 hours, 15 hours, 18. And you get tired. And I came over this ridge, I saw these huge crevasses in front of me that, if we went into, they'd kill us. So I ditched my kite down, and the other guys came up behind me and they cut their kites as well. And as we were like, okay, we're going to pull back from this situation, we're going to kite around and miss this whole area out together, Dave went into a crevasse and he fell just through the snow bridge up to here. So his legs are kicking out over literally like 500-foot icy void drop. He's gone. And he's screaming for us to help him, but we can't hear anything over the wind. So we literally can't hear anything. He managed to sort of like push himself forward and wriggle across the snow bridge, which could, was splintering. It was like the whole way. And he gets himself to the safety, comes to us, and he's just wide-eyed with fear. And the wind is howling, and it's like everyone is just so on edge of what's just happened. And we launch our kites again. Paul goes first, and he kind of like cuts across. Then I'm next. And we had to like sort of just bounce over a snow bridge of a crevasse because the wind was too strong. We just, and that fear, that sort of like, just like really feeling like you're on the edge. It was the first time I really thought, we're out of our depth here. We can really die. And how much I didn't want to die inside a crevasse. One of my friends died in Greenland in a crevasse. There's something about that that's really, really scary. And it's kind of like such a weird thing to say, I know, but like being entombed in ice at the bottom, that's scary.
Did you think you were going to die?
I felt that on that expedition, honestly, I felt that we were always just a step ahead of this nebulous force that was sort of behind us the whole time. And we just got away with it. Now I look back on it with lots of pride, and I'm very happy I did it and all those sorts of things. I don't think I'd do it again.
Was the exhaustion such, though, that it made death just, I don't know, seem almost more normal at the time?
Exhaustion and cold do very funny things to you. And absolutely, you can kind of get a little bit drunk and cavalier. You feel like you're drunk, and you get a little bit blasé about it. You're like, whatever. You're just operating on such thin amounts of sleep. You can be reckless with yourself because you're so tired. You're just like, oh, screw it. Let's just get over there, get it done, and we'll all be okay. And actually what you're doing is, you see it on Everest and mountain climbing all the time. Guys are absolutely exhausted, and they're just like, I'll just push a little bit further and it'll probably work out. But you're not making, Everest, you've got the altitude, so that screws you in the mind, obviously. But yeah, I think that fatigue and the thing about polar expeditions is that most people could do it for a few days or maybe a week. But after sort of 60, 70 days of doing it, and remember, like you've really lost a lot of weight. I went from 84 kilos to sort of like 66 kilos or something, 67 kilos. So you lose a lot of weight and you're in really a wretched state. So I'm really selling it, aren't I? You want to come on a trip?
And you only have, 2 changes of underwear, and which is remarkable. And
no, it's disgusting. It's not remarkable, it's vile.
You shower how?
In minus 30 degrees, at the end of the day, you take off all your clothes and you find a soft patch of snow and you rub the snow all over your body. That's how you do it. But going back to the pants, I had the idea that obviously you'd wear one pair of pants, you'd then basically take your pants, put them on your sled, so they're in minus 30 all day long the next day, and swap each day, right? So it kills all the ugums and nasties, and you get a stiff but I guess laundered pair of pants. The guy I was with, Alistair, took the view that no, he was going to do half the expedition in one pair of pants and then have the bliss of changing halfway through it on day 40 would be so good that that was worth it. And he had this stuff that's called like baby powder, like you put on kids to keep him fresh. And I remember us being in the sleeping bags together and I'm going like, you put that on your are you serious? And he's like, put it on babies for Christ's sake. Like, of course it's safe. So, and it's like, why'd you do it? And he goes, well, it's fresh. It's like, it's antibacterial. It's really good. It's like, can I have some? And he goes, yeah, sure. But I've got a tiny, tiny amount for the expedition. So like be really careful with it. So I was like, no problem. Those. And in my sleeping bag, I'm just kind of like this. And I go, boom, boom, this. And the top comes off and the whole lot goes into my sleeping bag. And I shut my sleeping bag like this. But the dust has like kind of coated my face. So I look like something out of Dangerous Liaison. And I've sort of got this sort of white powdered face. And Al just kind of looks at us and goes, you didn't. So that took about sort of 3 days of him not talking to me before he forgave me.
What happened with losing the 8 toes?
When we crossed Greenland, we skied all day, and basically we had a really short time period in which to do a major polar expedition. So we decided to do a speed crossing.
Who's we?
Of Greenland. This is the old bullets from back in the day when we skied to the South Pole, plus my good friend George, who had been to the North Pole. So we had some real experience with us. And we got hit by a massive storm, put an igloo over our tents, and we slept beautifully for like 24 hours. And then we hooked up our kites on the end of the storm and then did pretty much half of Greenland in one night. So we kited for like 25 hours or something nonstop.
And why?
Because we were doing a speed crossing, and then this wind was just so good. But after like 25 hours of like through the middle of the night, and the sleds are behind you just hitting these bumps, and you're going 55 kilometers an hour, it was like we were just going ludicrously fast. And like every time I'd pull in the bar of the kite, you just power up. It was like playing some sort of video game. Anyway, it was really cold. It was like sort of, the sun had dipped below the horizon a bit, and it was sort of probably minus 35, something like that. So it was cold. And so we're struggling with the cold a little bit because and when you get tired, like when you get tired, you get really cold. And George had basically said, I'll be, his feet froze, and he was kind of like, I'll be fine. I'll check it out when we stop. The problem is we just didn't stop. We just kept on going. And then we got in and we set up the tents, and he just said, can you pull my boots off? And I remember just pulling off the plastics, and then seeing this sort of brown blistering all over his toes. He got some bad frostbite and lost 8 toes.
How do you get from seeing that frostbite to losing 8 toes?
So the frostbite itself, it just, is obviously you've damaged the nerves and the flesh, you've frozen the flesh. And then what happens is it blisters, and you need medical treatment, and they'll try and stimulate the nerves again, but we couldn't. We were trying to reach the end of this expedition, and the next day we skied for like 10 hours through this ice fall, pulling heavy sleds, and then we did the equivalent of a marathon to get to the other side. So then we finally sort of planted our flag on the other side of Greenland. We'd done the crossing, hooray. And then it was like, okay, George's toes. And basically the flesh then goes black, and then you can wiggle it, and then you can just snap it off. And I came into George's house, and like he's in the bath with his little boy, Teddy, who's my godson, who at the time was like sort of 3 or something. And Teddy was just wiggling one of his toes. And I was like, Jesus, George, you're going to traumatize the child. And now he's had them mounted in a like a Perspex paperweight for his desk. He's got these 8 mummified toes that just sit there. Looks kind of cool, actually.
Wait, so when the kid was wiggling it, did the toe come off?
It was about to, and I was just like, George, Jesus, man. So Ted's probably going to be a little bit messed up.
Falling through the ice and nearly avoiding a crevasse? Wasn't that in Greenland too?
Falling through a crevasse. The one I think that we were talking about in the crevasse ourselves, that was here in Antarctica.
Right. But I for some reason I thought there was a close call in Greenland, but maybe not.
No, in Greenland was just mental. I mean, I think the world record was like, I think 17 days or something, or 16 days, and we did it in 9. Like, we just flew.
Any, in terms of injuries, I'm leaving off?
No, I've actually weirdly, I'm going to touch a lot of wood right now. I haven't ever broken a bone. I dislocated my shoulder whilst getting out the pool. But aside from that, do all these things, and I nearly cripple myself by getting out of a swimming pool. I mean, what an idiot.
2 children, Electra and Oscar. Tell a little bit about them.
You would need a whole nother interview for me to tell you about that. That's just like, there's so much to talk about. My daughter's 15 and more responsible than I am. She's like insanely capable, really erudite, very well traveled, just able to just be in any situation. They've come to Antarctica 3 times, and so they're kind of like old hands around here. My son was 6 when he first came to Antarctica, so he was a little boy, and it's just, my son's, they're good looking, they're intelligent, they're blessed, they're really nice people, and they are undoubtedly my proudest, by far achievement.
Well, you told me this yesterday, and I thought you were joking, but what even like talking about them gets you a little choked up?
Totally gets me choked up. Like I mean, when you watch a movie and on a plane, it's a disaster because you always end up crying. It's the same thing as my kids. It's like as soon as I start thinking about them and I get misty eyed.
Okay, why do you think that is?
I know what you're doing here. I know you.
No. I'm asking you, like, what is it about? Like, I'm not asking you about some deep dark moment.
No. So, but it's exactly that. What I'm honestly genuine, and I'm not trying to switch it back onto you. But what I'm really excited about is that one day when you have kids, you will feel what I'm feeling, and that is literally the purpose of life, and it is that insane pride of your offspring and the people that will replace you on this planet. And it's amazing. It's being a father it's tough. It's really, really tough. But it's also like I can barely remember what my life was like beforehand. And they're amazing.
In what ways did it change you?
I think being a parent is exactly as we were discussing. You become more responsible. Actually, fundamentally, I can actually boil it down into like one sort of sentence. It basically is the first time in your life that you care about something else more than yourself. And that is a really selfless, amazing epiphany when you realize that actually you care about something else more than yourself. It's an amazingly selfless, wonderful moment.
And it's interesting coming from somebody who has your profession, though, too, because your profession in a way is inherently selfish, because when you're doing these adventures that have a degree of risk, if something goes wrong, you're no longer there for your loved ones. So like, explain kind of that balance that you found there.
Yeah, this is exactly the balance. And I think that's why I'm doing less expeditions now. And that was in my youth. I have White Desert now, and there's some stuff here that is, I guess, risky, but it's a lot less risky than the old days. So I also don't want to stop being me. Like if I go and put myself in an office job and sit behind a desk, then I'll die inside and become a terrible person. Sorry for all the people who have an office job, you know what I mean? Like, so it's something that there's that balance between not being selfish enough to kill yourself and leave your children without a parent, and continuing doing what you love. And that's the balance of life, and that's tough.
How has your risk appetite changed since having kids?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, because that's like, that you really feel that. Acutely. And before it's your life, you do what you like with it, and I was quite reckless at times. But when having kids does just change that whole dynamic, to be away for 3 months was nothing. It was fine. It was no big deal. Now, if I'm away for 3 weeks, I really miss my kids. And then absolutely you have something parental very much jarring in the back of your head when you're about to jump off the thing or to do something. It's just like, yeah, you got kids now, you got responsibilities.
Okay, so explain what that is for you that is in the back of your head.
It's tempering it down. Before you just, as an example, yesterday in the mountains, the last one was that I climbed something that had a gap. Now the gap wasn't that big. It was kind of like from here to like you, It was about 6 foot but there was like a sort of 800-foot drop of, it was like a cliff. So you look over it and you're like, you can feel the wind coming up like this.
Giving me anxiety just thinking of it.
Yeah. And your palms go sweaty immediately. And then Jean-Yves was there. It's like, okay, you ready, Patrick? You're going to have to jump. And I was like, okay, yeah. And in the old days, that I feel would have just been like, okay, cool. Like, I'm on a rope, fine. When I did that, I was like, they say do one thing that scares you each day. Well, I like built up like a month in a day in like that 1 minute. But I like over-egged it and jumped way too far because I was obviously scared of falling down the cliff and like rolled on the sharp rocks and nearly pulled Jean-Yves over with the rope as well down the crack. So it was like total over-exaggeration. But it's things like that I genuinely got the, shit, what if I leave my kids behind? Like, do I need to do this? Do I need to? Of course, I don't need to jump across this thing, but.
Okay, but you still did it there.
Yeah, I still did it. Of course.
Are there situations that you find yourself holding back now?
Yeah, things like driving a motorbike and stuff like that. In the old days, I used to treat it like a video game and have a huge like race bike to be like blah, blah, blah. And now I absolutely take that back. And also you can be smart with it. Like I have a motorbike that is like doesn't go very fast. I'm getting middle-aged. I do things like mountain biking and wear armor and wear lycra. It's terrible.
What do you think you learned about yourself going through divorce?
Wow. Look, divorce is never pretty. I think I had on a 10 is bad and 1 is just. I think I was on a 1. So it's sad. There's a lot of sadness involved with being with someone for a very long period of time and then that falling to pieces. It's a deeply sad experience. I think it's very.
But there was like relief in a way too, right?
There are a lot of emotions. All I can tell you, there's a lot of complexity and a lot of emotions that you don't have to deal with when you are married. And suddenly they all come cascading in this like torrent. And also like, the right thing and the other person and are they okay? And there's just a huge raft of really heightened emotions in a divorce. And I think that it was incredibly important actually for Robin and I to make sure that the children didn't feel that.
Who I'm told are calmer
Yeah, I believe
on the other side of that.
And that kind of makes sense to me. Like if your two parents rip each other apart in a divorce, as I've seen with some of my friends, it's highly traumatic for the children and horrendous because they love both of you and you're ripping each other apart. So I think that it's
in a way that has to be satisfying though too. That I mean, you see or validating in terms of the decision when you see the positive impact it has on your kids.
Yeah, I really, really believe so. And actually going back to it, like that is more important than yourself. I go back to that one moment of being a parent. Well, their happiness and them being okay is actually more important than your own. So you either stick it out in a marriage that you're not happy with for the sake of your children, but that can also be living a lie and you actually start to become a very bitter, unhappy person, or you make a change.
So the experience taught you what?
I think I'm still going through it.
How so?
Because it's a lot. It's a lot. And it's been 2 years and it's a lot getting divorced. 23 years with somebody, it takes a while for that all to change. And yeah, there's a lot of, I guess the exciting bit of the new relationship is being able to try and learn from all those damn mistakes and start a new relationship on a very positive footing and actually learning from all of that crap and not repeating the history. So that's kind of really exciting.
I understand the divorce or the period around it was a time you kind of had to be talked off the ledge from selling this amazing place that you've built. Why?
I was emotionally spent. So like, how do you then give to other people and be a leader if you're actually feeling pretty bankrupt inside? Feels like being a fraud, if you're trying to inspire all these people that work for you and actually inside you're just hating life and it's tough. And then the stress of it, do you need the stress of a divorce and what you have to go through, and then the stress of your business, if it's a high-stress business like this. At some stages in life, it all feels too much.
And it was one you were running with your ex at the time.
Yeah, which is another fantastic complication. So I think that
That's one way. Right. But that, I mean, you also deserve a ton of credit for you two as a couple figuring out how to unentangle that in a way that allows both of you to
unentangle professionally, unentangle emotionally, and try to
And the hardest part of that, figuring that piece out, was what?
The hardest part of that is so the easiest part of that is to be respectful of each other. The hardest part is when lawyers get involved, and they have a vested interest in twisting everything to keep things moving.
Because the longer it goes on, the more they get paid.
It's billing, man.
Yeah.
And I think that we managed to very much keep the lawyers out of it. But my God, those are vampires, blood-sucking vampires. And I've seen other friends where it's really been hard. And so I think that, no, Rob and I did it well. A really thing well.
How have you seen climate change impact Antarctica?
So where we are is Eastern Antarctica, and it's huge, and it's very, very different from Western Antarctica, which is much smaller and along the peninsula. So there where the cruise ships are, and basically it's much further north, they see really, that's the vanguard of climate change, and they're seeing radical changes.
Like what?
Glaciers retreating, penguins moving further south, all the sorts of things that you would expect. Here, because of the scale of where we are in Eastern Antarctica, it's a little bit harder to judge. But we definitely, there's tons of scientists right now on the ice shelf just next to us measuring the ice shelf because bits are carving off. Part of it is having extreme weather events. So, you know, like a couple of years ago, we had 6 full hurricanes, which was very unusual. The weather is shifting here. I mean, it's an unpredictable place anyway.
How have you seen it shift?
By having more extreme weather. You know, by having higher winds, systems that, we had fog on our runway and we had humid air. Now this is a desert, we shouldn't be getting fog here. So yeah, things are changing for sure. But I think that we are sheltered from the sort of main visual impact of it. But yeah, there's a lot going on here. This is the bit that a lot of people don't understand, is that Antarctica is literally the litmus test of the planet. And the reason why all the climate researchers are here is because this is where it's all happening, here in the North Pole.
The Antarctic Treaty is up for renewal 2042. If you don't mind, explain what that is and why it's vital it be upheld.
The Antarctic Treaty is like it reads a little bit like a sort of a non-proliferation nuclear pact, basically. And what it is lots of different nations have all signed up together to say that they're not going to own this land. So they're not going to recognize any land claims. So it ain't Russians, it ain't Americans, it ain't whatever. And there are actual maps with these lines drawn, but lots of them overlap, of like Chile saying this and the Argentinians this and whatever. So no one's going to recognize any land claims, and no one's going to use this place for commercial use in terms of mining and mining resources. And basically to leave the place a preserve of science. Peace is a really big, there won't be conflict here, there won't be military here. Is really important. And so really it preserves one of the 7 continents. And this, Antarctica is significantly bigger than America. I mean, it's huge, this place. And most people just sort of see the little fingers on a map and they just give Antarctica almost no mind whatsoever. But it's vast and it's utterly seismic to the rest of the planet. So I think it's incredibly important that treaty continues. I think that people... if you don't believe in climate change now, then I don't even know what to say. But this is where, here in the North Pole, is where it's all happening. So people should pay attention to what is happening in Antarctica and the Arctic.
There was an interesting Economist article recently, and I wanted to just read a few different quotes from it and get kind of your reaction. But The Economist read, October 25th, an international court tasked with preserving marine life in Antarctica ended in acrimony as Russia and China vetoed every proposal. Both countries have also apparently blocked efforts to designate emperor penguins a protected species. Your thoughts on all of that?
So the issue is that the Antarctic Treaty is obviously done by consensus, so everybody has to sign up to it, and so that is enormously difficult, especially when you've got, all the politics going on in the rest of the world. There's nations that are obviously have a very clear eye towards commercial fishing and to krill fishing and all sorts of stuff. So they don't want to protect marine areas, and they don't want large areas to be off limits. So I think that is I guess the plus side is that no one owns it, and there's inaction in terms of stuff getting done. The downside is you've got nothing can happen without consensus. So, it's very difficult to get things moving.
And it's interesting you mentioned krill, because the next excerpt was, climate change is giving fleets greater access to stocks of krill, the world's most underexploited fishery. And then Xi Jinping, China's president, has explicitly said his country should exploit Antarctica's resources.
Wow. I didn't know he'd actually explicitly said that. Yeah. I think it'll be very sad. I think that it's incredibly important for, especially having children, going back to that again. It's like, I don't understand people who are just so prioritize the greed over the environment. There is a way of doing things sustainably. And, when cod stocks in the seas are left to rejuvenate and they're left in certain areas, they come back really quickly. It's sustainable rather than just killing everything. Go to the Mediterranean. There's nothing in that sea. It's all being fished out. And you see what humans then do. They decimate everything. And then it's just this completely inert environment. And for that to happen in Antarctica would be seismic for the rest of the planet.
And to go back to kind of where you started on the Antarctic Treaty front, it appears like, at least according to this Economist article, that activities happening that's pushing the bounds on the pact's prohibitions against military activity and resource extraction. So as somebody who has built their life and career around this place, your just view of that is what?
I think that nationalism is a really proud and wonderful and super dangerous. And the super dangerous because it just always pits one person against another person, one nation against another. They are the bad guys, we are the good guys in each eyes. And I think that the real sadness for me is how it's just that really myopic approach to, nationalism and the way life should be excludes others. And what I've learned from having 17 different nationalities in the company here in Antarctica, in a place that no one owns, is that we benefit from it hugely. We're so much more diverse. So the fact that we can't still, as humans with the internet where we're all connected, figure out that we have to save our whole planet, we have the mind and we have the brilliance to be able to do it. It's whether the nefarious side of humanity and the sort of the greed and all those nasty bits that we all sort of try to stay away from, whether that will win or not.
Because I want to end on a positive note, what do you see as a solution to some of these challenges?
People need to have a far more global outlook. Stop looking inwards, look across and be global and what is best for the planet. And we are so capable as humans, and we can do this. But the blithe ignorance or deliberate ignorance and just the lack of caring of the environment is a huge unfolding slow motion tragedy. And it's kind of like we've been given the Garden of Eden and we're just burning it. And it's like, that is, sorry, you said it was going to end on a positive note, didn't you?
But I would
I'm
say,
going to be really depressed now. I'm going to just put in a dark room.
But I would say you could make the argument that what is happening here and so many different countries
Coexisting.
being here together, coexisting, collaborating,
Yeah. It is a lovely example of the way humans can collaborate. And sorry, I went into a dark place there. I'll come back out again. But I think that I completely agree with you. Antarctica is a shining example how different nations can all work together and actually, like, the humanity can work together as humans, not as a Frenchman, a German, an Englishman, or whatever it is. So yeah, I think it is a really good example.
Well, this has been a lot of fun for all of us. The past several days of tagging along, seeing kind of what you're all about and how you have created this place is super cool. And thank you so much for having us.
Thanks, man. Really cool.